executive committee for the section on child abuse and neglect. And he was on the committee for child abuse and neglect for the American Academy of Pediatrics. He's on the International Advisory Board for the National Center on Shaken Baby Syndrome. He is also the former president and board chair of the Academy on Violence and Abuse. He has served as vice chair of the U.S. Advisory Board on Child Abuse and Neglect and boards of the American Professional Society on the Abuse of Children, or APSAC, and Prevent Child Abuse America. He's on the board of the Florida chapter, APSAC. He served on state and local child death review committees in Iowa, Georgia, and Florida. He was chair of the Committee on Child Abuse for the Georgia and Iowa chapters of the American Academy of Pediatrics and the committee in Florida. He has extensive interest in all forms of child abuse, particularly shaken baby syndrome, Munchausen syndrome by proxy, prevention, and child death review. Randy has authored several articles, chapters, and books, lectures, and he lectures frequently in the US and other countries. That's a lot. I've used up all your time. I think I used up all your time. Yeah.
No wonder I feel tired. Yeah. Well, it's good to see you all. And I know this is after lunch. Unlike radiology, I'm not going to turn the lights down. So you have to catch your nap anyway in full view. But I want to thank everybody for being here in the planning committee and for hosting some of us from the Academy on Violence and Abuse and my colleagues. First of all, it's great to see them face to face. So that's an extra benefit of being here. And thank you, Allison, for all that you've done for this. Allison asked me to talk about corporal punishment and no hit zones. And that's one of my things that I like to talk about. You know, probably 15 years, if you would have asked me, you know, how much work should we put into dealing with corporal punishment issues and things like that, I would have thought, oh gosh, you know, that's like hopeless. You know, what are the odds to get people to change? You know, can we make a difference? You know, do we have to wait another 100 years before it's even worth trying or something like that? And it turns out I'm sort of wrong on that, or I was wrong on that. The times are changing, and they're changing quickly enough and everything that this is actually a relevant topic. And I'm not saying it's not an uphill issue, because it is, at least in this country. But I want to kind of acquaint you with what some of the issues are and what all. You may not agree entirely, and you'd be wrong, but nonetheless, I want to go through in terms of, you know, what is the rationale in terms of, you know, what are we doing here? And what is this no hit zone, which kind of sounds like no smoking, because that's kind of what it is. So let's talk about that. I'm a child abuse pediatrician, and I see, or at least the people my staff sees, who I supervise, we see kids on a regular basis. We see we have 8 counties in Northeast Florida that are under my division. And in those counties, we see about 4,000 kids a year in hospitals, but a lot of outpatients as well. So it's a big enterprise. And of course, it'd be really nice if that would dwindle and get less and less. This is something like most everything in medicine, where if we put ourselves out of a job, that would be okay. You know, we don't need it. This is what a football player once did to his child with a switch. And then he said, I didn't know that was bad. I mean, come on, you know it's bad. You know, it's like, what do you think? This is like character building. But the key thing is that sometimes people will fall back and say, well, this is all I know. This is how I was raised and things. Let me ask before I get too much further, how many of you are social work? Okay, that's a lot. Nursing? Doctors? Anybody left over? No police officers? Okay, so anyhow, so it hits all of us that we see this probably in some form or another. You know, there is no part of medicine that child abuse doesn't touch. Gerontology, it touches really hard. And if you don't believe that, read something called the ACEs study, and you'll see that there's the health effects lifelong. But in pediatrics, we see the way the brain changes in the here and now. We're not waiting until you're 60 years old to measure the effect. We're seeing the effect, you know, as we go along. We heard this morning about effects on the brain, but I will tell you the brain doesn't care. The brain just adapts to the environment that it has. And if you choose to build a brain that's built for violence, that's what it'll do. And if you want to have a peaceful brain, you can build that one too. But an individual brain cell has no idea about what you're talking about. It just adapts to whatever it needs to adapt to. And things get selected out. So in pediatrics, I'd like to do something that would cut down on physical violence. We are actually making a little bit of progress on safe sleep, which is the leading cause of child abuse deaths. And then the second one is drowning, which is stubborn to do. But for prevention of physical abuse, which is our third leading cause of death from child abuse, this is no-hit zones is one of the strategies we think is a long-term strategy to change social norms. So it says, does anyone know where we keep the unwritten rules? Yeah, who knows on these things? So social norms change. It's just not natural for everyone. Resistance is strong but futile, of course, as you know. Civil rights. Guess what? Not everybody liked it now. I'm old enough that I was around in the 60s to see a lot of stuff that happened. And the 60s are what you've read in your history books for a bunch of you that, weren't anywhere near being around at that time. But there are a lot of people that just didn't want to get with the program. And there was a lot of stuff in the streets and pretty chaotic time to live in so many ways, but also with some hope in it. And so I think we reaped some of the benefits of that. All these things are works in progress. No smoking areas. Remember when you could smoke anywhere? Well, most of you don't because the success of no smoking. And it started out just a few places. People grumbled about it, said, you can't tell me what to do and all that sort of stuff. And then it expanded and it expanded some more. And as it turns out, grumble or not, look at the progress we've made in terms of it. Did that change the rates of cancer? No. But after 10, 20 years, it did start making a health impact. So it wasn't one of those things that there was an immediate benefit. You couldn't go to a legislator and say, you're going to see in 2 years, you're going to see the effect of this. Remember, most legislators like to see the benefit like right away so that, they can show this in their next election. They don't want to say, oh, we're going to spend money today for something down the road that you can't see. That is not an easy message for legislation. Gay marriage. Hey, guess what? Not everybody was on board with that. And 20 years ago, if you talked about that, vast majority of people wouldn't have been for it. Now it's more settled. We have TV in part to thank for that. Some changes, maybe some generational changes that have helped to make this move along. So here are things, and you've got your list. You could probably make this 10 times as long. What are things that people thought one way one day, and either we're in the process of change or there's been more substantial change in how we deal with these sorts of things. Not to say that we don't have more social ills to deal with, but social norms change is what ultimately matters. So for corporal punishment, spanking, it's hitting with a hand or object to make some pain. Corporal punishments, all that, regardless of what we call it. We have all these different names for it, but it's about hitting and all. So I was, in 2002, I was the lead author for the Academy of Pediatrics statement that said, when does skin injuries constitute abuse? And what we came out with, and still stands to this day, is if you hit somebody, like on purpose, and you leave the tiniest little bruise, medically, that is physical abuse. Okay? Now, I'm not saying what the response is to that. Maybe it's a whole different response to that versus beating somebody up really bad. But nevertheless, that is medical definition of physical abuse. We're fully aware that around the country, particularly southern states, but you see it crop up in some other things with case law and other things, that at times the legal system or the Child Protective Services system will say a little bit's okay. And of course, for the pediatrician, the reason that we don't agree with that is because you expect the pediatrician to say, well, I see a little bruise there, so I'm going to guess that the lawyers are going to say it's okay. And then you come to find out a year later, the lawyers guessed the other way. And suddenly you're in trouble. Well, there's no way a pediatrician can be in that bind. So We made it real easy. If you see the littlest thing, that's physical abuse. That's our diagnosis. But the legal diagnosis may be a little different. And there's a lot of stuff that says that you can go ahead and hit kids and it's legal. So what are other terms that we use? Well, we talk about spanking or you pop somebody. I always think of domestic violence when someone says, I just popped them in the face and they have a broken jaw. And you go, what is this pop thing that you're talking about? You know, it looks to me like you're slugging them or something like that. But all these little words that make it sound like it's a little less than what it really is. And it's something, and we live in a culture where we use these kinds of terms sometimes and we excuse these sorts of things. But you were hitting them. That's what you were doing. Remember when you leave that little bruise, medically, you're not spanking them anymore, you're beating them. Spanking means no bruise. If you see a bruise, I don't care what they say it is, medically, it's not a spanking anymore. It's a beating. Okay? And it's a bright line about that, at least medically. Tapping someone. All these different things, or discipline. So discipline can mean lots of things, but to some people, discipline means hitting. It doesn't have to mean it. That's not where discipline came from. It's disciple, you know, other sorts of things about guidance and all these other things. You could choose to see this as nonviolent, but not everybody does. And it all means hitting in some way. So let me tell you about the adverse childhood experiences, ACEs. You may have even seen this slide for all I know, but hopefully you know all about that. That's not the focus of this talk today. But I do want to talk about one aspect of it. This was a study that we're going to talk about where they went and looked at the original ACE data, adverse childhood experiences. It came out of CDC and Kaiser Permanente with Folletti and Anda were the authors. And in that original data, and it was not part of their 1998 report that first came out and talked about it, they went back and found out that there were a lot of questions were asked, and there was a question about spanking that was asked. And it says, sometimes parents spank their children as a form of discipline. While you were growing up during your first 18 years of life, how often were you spanked? And if it was more than a few times a year, they coded it as a yes. So a few times a year would be a no, but more than that was a yes. In looking at their response, and in that case, they got about 55% of respondents reported being spanked. That's actually kind of low in comparison. Prevent Child Abuse America in the 1980s and 1990s used to track, you know, what percentage of parents said that they, you know, spank in their kids. Again, we're not talking about physical abuse, just talking about spanking at this point. And it went from nearly 90% over this time period down to around 75. So it looked like there was this reduction in spanking going on. But the authors are smarter than that, the people at Prevent Child Abuse America. They said, here's two options. One option is that there's less spanking going on over time. The second option is they're lying. But if they feel the need to lie about it, isn't that progress? You know, the fact that now they're sort of ashamed and don't want to admit it and everything else, that's a change in how people view these things. So either way, they saw this as kind of a positive sort of thing. And we're not in anybody's home with cameras, you know, watching what they're doing or not doing. That wasn't the point. And I see we've got all this going on. All right, thank you. Hopefully that wasn't me. Okay. In this study that I'm talking about now, spanking was looked at for mental health impairments. They want to say, you know, is that related and everything else? And so physical abuse and emotional abuse are what you're thinking of, right? Spanking could give those kind of outcomes. And what they found is that if you factored those out in the original ACE stuff, you took out the physical abuse and the emotional abuse questions and still looked at, you know, in terms of their statistical equations, what's left over, they found out that spanking by itself increased the odds of suicide attempts, moderate heavy drinking, and use of street drugs. People say spanking is not a big deal. It doesn't matter. Not what the ACE study says. And what do they know, with all their, statistics and big sample sizes. So this is the thing. I think you're going to get a handout, but the name of the study is Spanking and Adult Mental Health Impairment. The case for designation of spanking is an adverse childhood experience. Sorry, I didn't mean to go too fast on that. So the idea basically is in that data set, nearly 18,000, which is replicated in at least 17 countries that I'm aware of, with similar results. When they teased out spanking by itself, it stood as an independent variable and a negative one at that in terms of long-term various health indices. So that's a reason that maybe we would want to cut back on it. It wasn't like it was positive. Liz Gershoff is at Austin, Texas, and she's done a bunch of research. One of the top researchers looking at spanking. And back in 2012, she looked at basically a meta-analysis looking at studies on spanking. Now, you'd think that kind of 50-50, some studies would say, yeah, there's this, spanking actually is an okay thing, helpful. There'd be some that say no, not so. And then there'd be some that would say, well, it makes no difference one way or the other. You'd think that. But the point of fact is, even in 2012, she couldn't find any study that said that spanking a child was helpful. None at all. And so that's kind of concerning. If you're wondering, which way should I think about this? It seems like it's skewed all one way. And we'll see more on this just a second. So the spanking by parents improved children's behavior. So what she did then is, this is a newer meta-analysis, looked at 75 studies over 50 years, 13 different countries. And there's some data since this that goes along with this as well. Looked at lots of kids, and what do you think they come up with? That there's no study that shows that spanking makes kids more compliant in the short term. Now, they're talking about in general compliant, like they continue to stay away from whatever it is you want them to stay away for, or something like that. If you're talking about short-term, meaning like in the next 5 seconds, yeah, it probably does something for that very, very short term, but not in general. They couldn't find that in the studies. And this is all the studies basically that there are on the subject. It didn't reduce aggression or antisocial behavior. It's not like, hey kid, you're hitting somebody, so I'm going to hit you, so you'll quit doing it. Couldn't find that result. It doesn't seem to internalize morals or long-term compliance. In fact, it's linked to worse behaviors by and large. Now, some studies would be more neutral, but by and large, a lot of times is that there was more aggression, more antisocial behavior problems. Now, you could argue, well, is the person who does this more antisocial to start with, and they're just the kids of those people? Hard to know about that. But none of the studies showed that spanking and better behavior worked. Remember, this is lots of studies, lots of kids, different countries, and they just can't show that effect at all. They do find unintended worse outcomes. And we're saying unintended because I think the parent a lot of times is not thinking this is going to happen. They're not reading these meta-analyses. They're not doing all this stuff. They're doing what the way they were raised or something like that. So they're not, they weren't thinking, gee, this is going to happen to my kid. But this is the risk when you do something. More mental health problems, more antisocial, more likely to continue the cycle. So spanking is hitting, and spanking and child outcomes they found is about 2/3 the size association between abuse and those same outcomes. 75% of physical abuse cases in Canada start out as spanking and escalates. So it does have consequences. So these are various statements. Again, you'll get this, but American Academy of Pediatrics, American Psychological Association, all have come out against spanking. Academy of Pediatrics came out in, I think it was 2019. was it 2018, 2019, with a study say, don't do it. And by the way, don't verbally abuse them as a substitute. And so us pediatricians were against it. Used to be we'd say, please don't do it, but now we say don't do it at all. CDC's against it in things they've talked about. The Psychological Association is against it. And possibly family practice, is that right, Sharon? Yeah, is against it. So these different organizations are now coming out and say against it. Now, they didn't say that 30, 40 years ago, but hey, everything changes. And this is one of the change that's gone on. The UN Convention on the Rights of Children says kids are to be respected. They're supposed to be physically, psychologically left alone. And it's one of the bases that a number of countries are interested in this subject as well. So this is an opportunity for social norms change. 63 countries by law have banned corporal punishment. You can't corporal punish in your home. You can't do it in schools. You can't do it anywhere in the country. It is against the law. Starting first in 1979 in Sweden. Sweden's trains still run on time. The society holds together. People say, well, if I don't spank you, the society will fall apart. Not true. It turns out it's just fine. It gets on. The old generation, I think back to the Greek days, used to say, well, what's up with the new generation? They're doing all these things, they're falling apart. It's not like it was in the good old days and all that stuff. They've been saying that for thousands of years, and we're still here. Imagine that. And that's just a grumble sometimes the old generation gives. And I don't want to say everybody in the old generation does it, but it's one you hear. The good old days, as told by the survivors, I might point out. So 63 countries, no corporal punishment. Some of that is concerns by some of those countries about the UN Convention on the Rights of Children. Now, in the United States, we are the only country that's not signed that law, that convention. Every other country in the world has, including a few that are barely brand new countries to begin with. Maybe the crime rate's down in Europe, maybe. So what are these different countries? Well, there are 3 North American countries, but it's not US. I had somebody from Canada say they'd be the last country to sign off. I said, you mean before us? I mean, I ought to be, we would be the last country, but this Canadian thought they would be the last. I said, gosh, you guys in Canada, you're nice, so you're wrong. You will sign off before we will. But some Central American countries certainly have. Sweden was first. The last couple, and there's a typo there, sorry, it's 2021. It's Colombia and Korea. As you know, that would be South Korea, not North Korea. And North Korea, well, they do a lot of things. So, spanking is probably the least of the concerns. But anyway, all these different countries have done it. And here's a bit of a map to give you sort of some guidance as to what we're looking at. As you can see, basically all of South America. So South America is one of the leaders. Now, does that go along with your stereotype of what you think of? I mean, if I'd said guess a continent, would you have guessed South America? You might not have. So one of the delights sometimes about data is data sometimes goes and teaches you things about things that you had your own stereotypes in your head about. And that's actually fun, is to learn something. Some African countries have done that. The Western countries, France more recently came on board. Wales is actually, and Scotland aren't countries, but maybe they'll convince England to join up. But it was really the Northern European countries first. Eastern Europe came along. Mongolia out there, Japan, New Zealand, but not Australia. So a variety of different kinds of countries around the world, and ones that you wouldn't necessarily expect. Congo, and what all. So we also think there's about 26 more countries that will in the next 10 years join on board. So that means that like getting close to half the countries in the world are going to ban corporal punishment. Okay. Sadly enough, Russia doesn't ban it. Maybe we see the effects of that now. This is a multi-year study and everything else. And what this was, it's kind of a quirky thing. Study came out in 2021. But for some reason, somebody's been doing an ongoing longitudinal study of 35-year-olds. I don't know why. I don't know the logic behind it. The article didn't explain all that. But they've been measuring 35-year-olds and asking, have you spanked anybody recently? And in the past year. And what they're finding is that the percentage of that is going down. Significantly is going down. So there's a societal change. Somebody could come by and say they don't agree with that. It doesn't matter whether you agree with it. This is what's going on. Or you might agree with it. You might, cheer it on. But whatever way you think about it, this is what's actually happening in our society here in the US, one way or the other. So if you're like of an old generation where you think, hey, we're into this a lot more, a younger generation, the newer 35-year-olds, aren't into it as much. And that's just a change that's happening. And why is that happening? Well, it's not going to be for the no-hit zones I'm going to talk about, but we want to accelerate this trend. That's what we really want to do. All right. So is this mushy-headed thinking that do-gooders think about and everything? I'm going to challenge any of you that, are kind of on the fence on this with this study in particular. They defined harsh corporal punishment, which a lot of people would just call corporal punishment. But they defined it as getting hit 12 times a year. So that means like at once a month for 3 years. Using a belt or hairbrush paddle maybe once a year. No bruises, nothing that we would call physical abuse. Okay, so that's kind of the criteria as to what they're looking at. And also supposedly not in anger, but being more in control. I'm not so sure how well they could know that, but that was at least what they tried to do. But here's the results. So if you're kind of a repetitive spanker, even though it's not like a weekly thing or a daily thing, and there are kids that get that. I certainly see it in my child abuse clinic. Kids are getting hit all the time. But even at this rate of once a month and things, when they do MRIs and you measure the volumes of brain, how big is the brain in certain locations of the brain? The gray matter, which is kind of the center part of the brain cell. The white is the long cable that transmits to the next cell. The gray is sort of the main center of the cell. That was reduced by 19% in the right medial frontal lobe, 14.5 in the left medial frontal lobe, about 17% in the right anterior. In other words, your brain's smaller in some areas. And some of these areas are where the executive functions are, the stuff that doesn't control anger as well. Because the part of the frontal lobe is to tone down the amygdala and the parts of the brain, the limbic system, that make you want to punch somebody out in a bar or do something aggressive. Yes, Dave. I don't think I have it right here. Sorry, Dave. This is about 4 or 5 years ago. So the key thing is, if you're going to hit your kids, they're going to get a less well-developed brain. Okay, it's not brain damage. That's the wrong word to use. It just doesn't develop as well in some of these areas. In some areas that you want to be good, the part that, help to, kind of keep you more under control and things. So it creates a vicious cycle. Oh, and your IQ is down a little bit. Not a huge amount, but it's down a little bit. So when somebody comes in and says, I hit my kids and it doesn't matter, actually it matters. I'm sorry. We can look and say, I don't know about your one kid, because your one kid might not fit this. But I will tell you, as a group, your kids are going to have a problem. And it's going to be a physical problem in the brain. that is a harm. It's not a substitution of one brain cell for another for a different world. It's actually a decrement. Okay, so what are we going to do about all this? You know, if we think that maybe corporal punishment isn't the best thing. By the way, you know, do you think any of the bad people that shoot up places, do you think they were spanked? Yeah, I'm pretty much sure they all were. Yeah. You know, that's certainly the stories you get, is that they were treated badly in their childhood. And guess what? Here's you know what we reaped as a consequence. So no hit zones. Sometimes they're called hit-free zones, but the word hit is one of the key things we want to have in it. And one of the things that the title can't quite get, because every once in a while someone says, well, you don't call spanking hitting. And it's like, yeah, we do. That's exactly what we call it. So if anyone misunderstands that, we want to do it. It's what you think no smoking zones are, same kind of idea. The history of this is that in Rainbow Children's, Lolly McDavid just got frustrated one day about kids being hit. We all have. I mean, I was and all that. What she did, took it a step farther. She put up a sign saying, no hitting here, which was the first no hit zone, essentially. I think many of us have always told people you can't hit when we see it, sort of thing. But she decided she's just going to put a label to it all and everything. It was really a little later, sometime after that, that Louisville really picked up on it, and some other places, and really popularized it even more. And so this is spread around. Maybe started with children's hospitals, but it's not limited to children's hospital by a long shot. It just happened to be a starting point in some ways. And there's lots of hospitals and organizations, and we'll see a little bit about that. What do you need to do to be a no-hit zone? Well, you need some sort of signage. In other words, if I was talking to one of our social services things some years ago, and I was saying, you need to be a no-hit zone. And they said, well, you can't hit in our social service agency. We're no-hit zone. I said, you got to sign up? Well, no, there's no sign. Well, then how would anybody know? You know, you got to post a sign somewhere and say, no hitting here, you know, type of thing. So one of the things to be a no-hit zone is that you need a sign saying there's something there. A policy, if it applies. Now, hospitals are going to have policies because they like to have policies on everything, and they put it in a book somewhere and nobody ever reads it particularly, but nonetheless, it's there. And so other organizations like that. I had a discussion with Department of Motor Vehicles person once, and they said, we don't do policies. And I said, it doesn't matter. You don't have to have a policy. But if you are an organization that does policies, you'd want to have a policy. And part of it is training your staff. Suddenly one day signs show up about no hitting, and the staff says, what are these? Or somebody that's coming through asks the staff, well, what is this? And the staff doesn't know. That's not going to help. So you want to have something up there that teaches about that. The APSAC advisor, American Professional Science Abuse of Children, we have an article on that. Stacy LeBlanc and me and several others. And this is the reference to it. You could probably Google it faster than you can copy this down out of your handout. And I'd probably do it that way myself. That's how I get to it. But however you do and everything. And we go through kind of step by step how to put one together. So my hospital where I work is a no-hit zone. Okay. The president, when we went to him and we said we should be a no-hit zone, he said, okay. And then we were. We had to spend months, you know, figuring out, you know, the signage, training staff, doing a bunch of other stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that's involved. You have to train not just the current
Later
staff,
on,
but
I
you
might
have
not
to know
be
that
at
there's
this
always a
number.
turnover. And in the
Okay.
turnover and everything, in the turnover, you
Yeah.
have to
Okay.
have new people that you cover,
Okay.
and you
Okay.
have
Okay. Bye-bye.
and we could use everybody to mute, please. Thank you. One of the things about Zoom we've learned during COVID is the bleed over. So if you go there and everything, we give you some ideas in terms of how other people have done these. But again, staff training is an important feature, just so that they know what's going on, if nothing else, and a little bit more. So I'll give me some examples. This is what we do at Wolfson Children's Hospital, which is Jacksonville. We were not the first children's hospital in the country by a fair shot. We were one of the early adopters, but we weren't the earliest adopters. And again, my president just said, let's do it. And so we did it. Sometimes life is that easy. You just ask somebody. I just recently had a veterans group that we were giving an award to. And they said, what can we do for you? And you said, what? You need to be in no-hit zone. And they said, yes. That's as fast as it goes sometimes. My medical examiner's office, I was at a child death review team meeting years ago. And I don't know, I connected the dots somehow as I'm sitting next to the head of the medical examiner's office. And I turned to her and I said, you should be in no-hit zone. And she said, okay. It can be that simple, okay? What's hard is to remember to ask. And if you don't ask, it never happens, right? Okay, so my challenge to you is, it would be really nice when Allison tells me that you guys are in no-hit zone. Okay, join some of the other hospitals around the country that are. You can do it. It doesn't hurt. It's not painful. There's never been pushback with all the hospitals ever. There's just no downside to it. Okay, inertia is what kills you. And we could talk about that later if we have a chance. Here's some of our signage. We're hit-free zone, or it can be talked about no hit zones. Here's some of the things that are important about the signs. We threw a bunch of different kinds of signs in there. The kind of the mantra that we use around the country is, they will say that no adult can hit a child, an adult can't hit another adult, a child can't hit an adult, and a child can't hit another child. University of Cincinnati, they added one extra, and they said nobody can hit an animal. We thought that's actually pretty cool, but most of the time we're just sticking with the 4 that we have. But we certainly agree with Cincinnati about that as well. One of the things on any signage that you do, that in this particular one, we went to say, I'm little and I'm still learning, love me, don't hit me. And it seems like, why would you want to do that? We also have more about positive parenting, and you can go to our Wolfson Children's Hospital Positive Parenting website and learn about child development and alternatives that you can do, because occasionally parents say, you're going to take away hitting. That's the only thing I know. I don't know what else to do. And they're not lying to you. They're absolutely right. They don't know. And our job isn't to growl at them about it. Our job is to help the parents. That's what we're here for, is to help parents. So we got to give them some ideas. We actually have QR codes in hospital rooms. When somebody gets bored enough sitting in a hospital room, they can go scan it and it'll take them to the website. So we make it easy. We have these signage up. I'm going to show you how we display it around the hospital as to where that is. People have done this in different ways. You may run into hospital issues about, do you put something on the floor? You can do what are called floor talkers, or can you put it on the wall permanently? Do you have electronic signs that you can do it? And a lot of that has to do with how hospitals think, they can display things in various ways. And that's kind of a local determination. It's not something that we can say one size fits all in terms of how to do these things. The president of my hospital, quote him, he said that in my house, we get to say how we want things done. Okay, someone could come back and say, well, isn't it legal in the state of Florida to hit a kid? Yeah, it's legal. Do you think us putting up a sign changes the law? No, it doesn't. But you know what? You don't run your life by what the law says. You have to, at some point, decide that you're going to run your life for other reasons. And it's not just what the law allows. And that's how you run your life. That's a really poor way to run your life. You need to sort of say, what do I aspire to? So it may not be against the law when I go to some of my friends' house and I have to take my shoes off at the door, but I do it anyway. We get to do some things that way for a change. And we don't all have to be legalistic about it. So this is kind of some of the signage that we want to put up. But we also have to steer them to where can they find out more about this. So a little bigger thing. This is in Kentucky, University of Louisville, this Norton Hospital, and see a similar sort of thing. Some differences in how they do that, but that they're a no-hit zone, and staff members be happy to talk to you about more information and things. This is Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania. This is what they have. And these kids look like they got hit a little bit. But anyway, again, same kind of message. Nobody hits anybody. Emotional effects can be remembered forever. Don't hit. And trying to get the message out there. And we display this in a way that people can see this. You don't have to have pictures all the time. You can go back to doing something like that. But the idea basically is we want them to know this is a mission statement. That's what we're trying to say. This one, it's another example. Same idea, hit free zone. This is out of Wisconsin, I think. They were saying hitting hurts, not quite the way that we say it other ways, but similar sort of message. Now, we could say this is a safe zone, but what does that mean? You don't get asthma? I mean, we don't know what safe means. So, it's safe to hit kids. I mean, so nobody knows what that means. So it probably needs the word hit in it if you're going to have any language at all. This is where we display some of our signage. We can have it up on the elevator. But we really do instead is we have these things on easels that sort of are freestanding. And you walk into our clinic and right at the entrance to the hospital in the lobby, we have these sort of things on their little posts standing there, and they're at all the elevators. And so you get on the elevator, you get off the elevator, and there's the signage. My staff probably doesn't see it anymore. It blends into the wallpaper, and I doubt if they see it anymore. It's an everyday thing, and you don't even notice it. But it's the visitors that do. They've never seen it before, so this is a brand new thing. And people comply with signs. If you tell them to go that way, most people will go that way. Whatever it is. And so that's the beauty of this thing. We actually did research, and one of my fellows did research, and we looked at hitting, and we have hitting in the hospital. You've had hitting in yours. We've had the police have to come to ICUs and take people away, both adult and children. It goes on. The janitors see it, the president of the hospital, and everybody in between sees it at one time or another. But we found out after we instituted it that they were seeing less of it, that the signs actually made a difference. And that's what people have found in some published studies and observations that people have found in hospitals in a variety of places around the country. It actually makes that kind of a difference. Now, does it affect the whole community? No, the whole community doesn't spend their time in a children's hospital. So it's going to be a small subset. It also will affect the staff because you're teaching staff. And in our hospital, it's 1,200 people. And 1,200 people are out there knowing this is the message we want them to take home. And some will take it home as a result. Well, both the Academy on Violence and Abuse, again, we're here, Allison's on our board, and, this is, we're part of this conference. We're for violence across the lifespan, or life course, or whatever we're saying these days. Life course, okay. But you got to be thinking about domestic violence. Remember, we heard about that today. And elder abuse, let's not forget elder abuse and all that. So it's really a big spectrum of things. And so we have various signages up for all of this. Same message. We don't need anybody hitting anybody anywhere. Okay. So teaching the staff, how do we go about that? Well, we first met with the staff. We met with particularly mid-level staff and tried to teach them. We had about a dozen different classroom teaching things. We're teaching them about what's going on, what's the purpose, hey, we're not debating whether you agree with this. The president of the hospital's decided this. We're telling you about implementation. That's what we're doing. I think we had people who disagreed with us. And, but hey, this is what we're doing, and everybody was real good about, doing what they're supposed to. We put a website together. There are a variety of things you want. We had a big press conference in town and brought in several organizations that at the same time, and it's big news thing that they played on TV and everything, saying, here's what we're doing. Didn't really get any pushback in the community either. And that, by the way, is a southern town down there in Jacksonville. So whatever your stereotype about the South is, you might be right sometimes, but you're wrong sometimes too. Okay. Purpose, as we said, is to create an environment of comfort and safety for patients, family, and staff. Okay. Who gets hit in the hospital? It's not so much the patients, but who gets hit is the kid that they brought along on the visit who's bored. Oh my God, if you're a little kid and you have to sit around in a hospital room with all these adults and everything, you're going to get bored. You're going to act out. The adults are worried and upset because somebody's sick or not doing well. I mean, this is a recipe for something to go wrong. And so that's one of the reasons we need to say, no, everybody has to calm down about it as well. But there's a lot of stress and anxiety. People get angry. Seems kind of natural that would happen with some people. Now fortunately, most people compensate, but not everybody does. And while we understand it, we just can't have it. Okay. So what do you need to do? Well, you need to put something up saying, that you're a no-hit zone. The other thing is, what are you going to do? What if someone does hit? That's the worry that we hear the most. Somebody says, well, you're asking me to have this no-hit zone, and I don't want to get in the middle of somebody hitting, because what if they hit me? Or if I make it worse somehow? And our answer to that is do what you always did. Call security. Call the cops. If it's that thing, do not put yourself in danger. We're not asking our staff to do anything that's more dangerous, but you're thinking too late sometimes. Sometimes it's just too late. We get that. But what you need to do is de-escalate it before it even gets there in the first place. That's the emphasis. But always do it safely. And if you're staff and it looks to you like you're in some sort of danger, then back off. We're not asking you to do anything. Okay, it's not that sort of thing whatsoever. It's the problem you have at a grocery store, right? Somebody's whacking away at a kid and you think, well, what am I going to say? I kind of don't want to be involved. And if I say something, will things get worse? Are they going to hit me? That's that's a legitimate concern and everything. Usually it's not so bad as that, but what can we do? So we talked to them about de-escalation and what are the alternatives that you can do. So we want to promote safe and healthy, use supportive communication, and some interventions. So we have to give our staff some ideas. How could they do that? And we can yak at them about that, and that's worth something. But I'm going to show you a video in just a minute that kind of helps you sort of see it in action, such as it is. Again, we did training for the kind of mid-level, but for most people, I can't be there every shift to get to them. How am I going to get to the night shift and then the next shift and the next shift? And then they get new people and I have to keep teaching them. We can't do that. That's not physically possible. So we had to build it into the orientation course. And so they get about 20 minutes to talk about this and that this is part of their training when they come on new into the hospital. So what can we do as far as scripting things? You've been waiting for a while. Let me check how much longer it'll be. Somebody could ask that. That's pretty innocuous thing. Kind of help that de-escalate something. Or, just reflect that, you see a kid acting up, say, most 2-year-olds, it's kind of hard on them. Could we do something to distract them? It'd be really good if we had some materials around to help, that kid that needs something to do and the parent, who's got a lot on their mind perhaps. And then ultimately just saying, using the Wisconsin thing, but we're saying that this is no hit zone and, people can't hit people here. And people respond to that kind of authority message sometimes. And they don't punch you out. Parking garage. and in Spanish. But you know, it depends on the languages that you have to deal with where you're at. But we have examples in Spanish from Los Angeles, from Illinois, from our place, from a variety of places. And on a website that I'm going to show you. Various brochures about, you know, where can they get help and education and things like that. It's in our hospital admission about no hitting, and in our discharge papers, there's no hitting. So they're getting this in multiple places. So let me play this. I hope this works okay. I do not have a cursor. In which case it's not going to play okay. So you're going to solve that for me, right? Thank you. Well, let's do it that way. That's fine.
Okay.
That's all we can. I need volume.
Oh. Oh no. Let's do it this way.
How much longer am I gonna be?
I hope we get to go home tomorrow. Brother. I just don't know.
Mom, fix the TV.
I'm taking care of your brother. No. Come on, sit down. Sit down. Beckett, Beckett, sit down. Beckett, look, you need to sit. Do you want me to pop you?
I know you're illustrated, but here at Wilson, we're a hit-free zone. Is there anything I can do to help you?
Get my kid under control?
We just ask that you don't hit your child. And we have resources, let me get some resources for
Okay,
you.
I can use them. Thank you.
Hey, Mom, here's some information that we have for you. This tells you what to expect as far as behavior with the age of your child. And this is behavior modification. It'll help to give you ideas of things you can do rather than popping.
Thank you.
Lead with love. And there's a website also. There's a lot more information.
Great. I'm
Okay.
gonna need it.
Okay.
He's only 2. We got a long road ahead of us.
Oh, you got it though.
So that's to give you, yeah, go ahead. So that's to give you an idea, if you will, about what we can do. So we play this simulation. We have a simulation for the domestic violence thing and for the elder abuse as well. These are homemade in a sense. I mean, you know, we did it at our hospital. It wasn't done by a big production company and anything. But this is what is part of our staff orientation that everybody gets and everybody has got that works at the hospital. And by everybody, I mean, if you're the cleanup crew, if you're the cook, if you're anybody, you all get it. Okay, because everybody sees it and it just stresses people to see these things. Notice this is a get there before they start whacking the kid. Okay, that's when the point of opportunity. We don't need, you know, how can we be supportive and helpful? Because it is a stressor. The person that did this is actually one of the big bosses at our hospital and everything else. I have no idea how she got her kid to act up or if that's just how he is all the time. So who knows? But it worked out okay for the filming. So we got that. He ended up being a good little actor, if you will. So this is what some other people have done is distractions by age. Okay, so the kids that having trouble, they're getting bored out of their mind, they start to act up. What could we give them? You know, something to draw on, some crayons, and maybe something to eat or something else like that. And have these things ready and available because you know it's going to happen. So anticipate it, you know, unless you've got different human beings than everybody else in the world has, it's going to happen to you. And just be aware of it. And here's an example of our wheels, and they just sort of spin around. You've seen these probably in other contexts and everything else. And you pick the age of your child, and the other side, we give you a few ideas about how to cope with behaviors. I will tell you as a pediatrician, here's the real secret of being a parent. Be a model. Whatever else you do, the real important thing is your kids will be mostly like you. And if you're not being a great parent, you're not going to necessarily get a great kid. So they will mimic you really well. Primates are like that, and maybe not other mammals as well. And our kids are like that too. So you see these parents that are calm and easygoing, and their kids are calm and easygoing. Yeah, be those people, as much as you can. I'm not saying it's perfect, but that's what you try. And for many kids, that will work out. So this is an important thing. Again, you can easily Google this. Just put no hit zone toolkit. And when you go there, you'll find signage, you'll find all kinds of information about how to do these things. This is something that APSAC took the lead, but our Academy on Violence and Abuse is part of this. The what? Corporal punishment, yeah, National Alliance to End Corporal Punishment as well. So various organizations, there are no hit organizations, and we've collectively come together. Dave's part of this. Sharon, you're part of this, aren't you? Yeah. And what we've done is we put together some of these ideas about what can we do to end corporal punishment, and even the broader picture about physical abuse, if we can. And here's another example of sort of a stop sign about this. You can put these posters up, just take them. We're not a controlling authority. You can be a no-hit zone. You don't need our permission. You don't need anybody's permission. You didn't need that for no smoking. You don't need it for this. And you could even buy somebody else's stuff. Some of our stuff's on the website, or do your own. Some more stuff about, you can get into some stuff talking about things at different ages, ways you can go. You can go to the CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, their Division of Violence Prevention, and they've got stuff and videos about parenting. Your taxpayer dollars already paid for this. Use it. When I ask residents, they're clueless that such things exist, which is really sad for us all as pediatricians that we haven't informed. But most pediatricians don't know it either. CDC has materials. So does the Academy of Pediatrics. There's a lot of materials out there about parenting issues. And not all of them mean you have to read a book to how to deal with a child. And of course, dealing with yourself is actually one of the important things too. And when you go to the toolkit, you could sign up and be a certified no-hit zone or no certified hit person yourself, not just your zone, or an organization. You don't even have to have a physical presence. You can do it as an organization. And as Dave Corwin keeps reminding me, you can be a no-hit home. You could put something up. You know how you put the stuff saying that you're a safe place for little kids after when they come home from school? Yeah, you could be a no-hit home. Put a sign up and everything else. One of the signs they have in one of my locations is we just printed it off out of the computer and put a piece of tape on it on the wall. That was the cheap way of doing it. You can do it. You can do it nicer than that. It costs you money depending on how fancy you get. But it just doesn't matter, whatever. This is something that I put together that we use was, what's your level of being a no-hit zone? And if you're level 1, is that what you guys are at, is level 1, where you're kind of interested in it? You're thinking about it? Yeah, that's level 1, which is that you've heard of the idea and you're thinking, hey, that could work, don't know how. Level 2 is where you're kind of really getting at it now, and you're getting a committee together probably and starting to work away at it. And level 3 is you are no hit zone. And then after that, it's more, like how much more of a no hit zone you are until eventually you're at level 5, where it's not just you, but you're getting your community involved as well, either locally or regionally, statewide, something like that. I would hope that as a leader in other ways that you guys would be a level 5 someday. Okay, we are. in Jacksonville. Maybe you guys outdo us. We don't mind. And so certainly push along on that and everything else, but I think you can do it. Yeah, Dave. Okay, so what about examples beyond hospitals? You're thinking this sounds like a hospital thing, but it's certainly more than that. The Dane County, this was some years ago, the Dane County, Wisconsin Prosecutor's Office, that's Madison, Wisconsin. They're a no-hit zone. Okay, it can be prosecutors, and if you were a level 5, you'd be getting other people in your community involved. Think about your prosecutors. Why can't they be a no-hit zone? In Jacksonville, our medical examiner's office, I told you I just asked her and she said yes. When you walk into our medical examiner's office, you walk up a couple of steps, you open the door, and right there at eye level is the no-hit zone poster. It's the first thing you see when you walk through their door. Okay, so are kids getting hit in the medical examiner's office? I mean, isn't most everybody dead? What's the issue? It's not zombies at night. I mean, what's going on? Well, in point of fact, I'm told by the ME's people, and they probably know what they're talking about. Apparently, it's more about adults. And I guess everybody that comes to the ME's office isn't happy for one reason or another, if you can imagine. And some of these unhappy people do what unhappy people do in other contexts, is they might hit each other. So they think it's relevant, and they ought to know. So anyway, they've been a nice supporter of ours through some years on this. All the Catholic schools in New Orleans are no hit. And the bishop or whatever it is, I'm not sure I have the right rank here and everything, but the it said, yeah, they're all no hit, so you can't hit. I'm not Catholic. I know there's a stereotype out there, and I'm not trying to suggest anything to anybody that knows more about this than I do, and I know a number of you do know more about it. But you know that stereotype about the nuns hitting you with rulers? Apparently there's no more rulers to be for that reason. You can't be hitting kids with it. So however true that ever was, that's gone. And they can't do anymore. The Catholic kids we think in New Orleans are going to turn out just fine. There's as much as they ever would have in the first place. And whether or not, you get to hit them with the rulers or not, that's gone. So this is New Orleans, Jacksonville. Remember that stereotype about the South that they do more hitting than other parts of the country? Well, they do. But here's the thing. As soon as you start to say, well, I'm in a group or I know a group that hits more than another group, guess what? There's plenty of hitting going on with everybody. So I find that to be close to useless information to try to identify groups and sort of say, well, we do more of it, or it's in our culture or something else. Forget it. Everybody's culture has it. We're trying to change everybody here at the same time. And we're changing it in the South in some ways. In fact, we're kind of a little more of the leaders than some parts of the country, at least temporarily. That's the case. And who'd have guessed it? County health departments around Norfolk, Virginia. I got all the child advocacy centers in Florida to be no-hit zones. I was on a phone call with them. I said, I want to talk about no-hit zones. And I said, y'all need to be no-hit zones. And they took a vote and all said unanimously yes. It took me less than half an hour to do it. Not everything's hard. Sometimes things can go easy. And you find yourself thinking, why didn't I do this before? Because it could have been that. So a lot of things in life are there for the asking. Just ask and think about it. My child protection team, we're in 8 counties, and naturally we have signs in all. We have a physical place in all 8 of our counties, and we have signs up in all 8 of these things. There's no-hit cities. Stoughton, Wisconsin, which is a suburb of Madison, Wisconsin is a no-hit city. You can see it at YouTube at this thing. And you can't supposedly hit. There's no legal sanction. It's not like any handcuffs are going to get put on you if you do. What they're saying is you don't hit in our city buildings and things. It was unanimous. Madison Heights, Michigan. No spanking any of the city-owned properties there. In Jacksonville, about 3 years ago, when we established it in a variety of places, we went to City Hall and we tried to get it passed that City Hall would be a no-hit zone. We got the usual arguments from religious to you can't tell me what to do, and the law says I can hit kids, and I want to hit kids. I don't know what they all the usual excuses and everything. And after all that debate happened, it was a tie vote to make City Hall, which means we failed on it because it was a tie. One person missed the meeting. She would have voted in our favor. So that's kind of a partial victory in the sense that in a southern city, we almost made City Hall a no-hit zone. Okay? And if you think it's true that if you live farther north or farther west, it would be easier, then go ahead and do it. Show us up. We don't care. Let's get it out there. We're going to try this audio here again. Hold on. I think I'm seeing a cursor here.
Hi, my name is Ishmael Ozan, and many of you know me as the Dane County District Attorney, but I'm also a husband and a father of 2 young girls. Today, I'm asking you to make the choice my wife and I made to not use physical punishment with our children. Many of us are not aware that over 16 years ago, the American Academy of Pediatrics urged doctors to recommend that parents not use physical punishment on their children. Today, over 100 years of research on children and families supports this recommendation. Look, well-meaning parents may use physical discipline intending to teach their children to make good choices. But we now know that physical discipline actually leads to more disobedience and aggressive behaviors in children. We all want what is best for our kids. Today, we now know what is best for kids is parenting based on respect, mutual understanding, and logic, rather than fear of physical pain. Please join me in learning more about positive parenting and creating a violence-free home.
This public service announcement is sponsored by the U.S. Alliance to End the Hitting of Children, www.endhittingusa.org.
All right. So this is up in liberal Madison, Wisconsin, and everything. But even so, this is a prosecutor. He's elected. And after he made this message, 5-6 years ago or something, what do you think that meant as far as him getting reelected? Well, as it turns out, he won with 40% margin. 40%. Apparently, it didn't hurt him to take this stance and everything else like that. So are we sometimes afraid, well, what will other people think about us? And oh my gosh, I'm going to take an advocacy stand. Maybe I'll wait 800 years because I know I'll live forever and I have all that time on my hands. No, it's not the way to think about it, obviously. I mean, it's not super courageous to take this stand. And hey, maybe most people disagree with you. That's okay. That's fine. I mean, eventually the worldwide trends are on your side. It's going that way. That's where civilization is going. You're just trying to get there a little faster this way. And certainly Ishmael, he's been with us. He's part of our national coalition as well. And it's coming from a prosecutor, guys that prosecute crime, and he can see the value of that because he sees this isn't going anywhere. People sometimes think, well, this is going to keep my kid away from crime. The stats don't agree with that. The stats go the other way. So despite the good intentions of a parent, sometimes it's backfiring. And it's not the way to go. And there's another whole lecture we could go into, right, Sharon, about that with Stacy Patton and everything else about cultural issues and things. But I see people from the islands down in Florida, like islands south of us. Now, they all have their cultural, stuff about this. And it all turns out that it's not true for everybody. And we all need to stop hitting, basically. So what if we put up these signs in Target or Walmart and we started going all kinds of places in your supermarkets? We could do that. You know, supermarkets don't like kids being hit. You know, disturbs the customers. You know, what if they put up some signs and people quit hitting so much in those places? So various things we need to do is get media attention to this. And we have, if you guys ever become one, bring in the reporters and tell them about it. You know, let them know about it. It's a plus, you know, it's not a story where they come to find out you did something wrong, but you're doing something right. That would be good. And contact me if you have any questions, want to join the effort, or Allison or any of the other people here from Academy on Violence and Abuse. We're all willing to help in whatever ways we can and do this all together in any way you want us to. But the nice part is it's decentralized, so you can kind of do this yourself even. We have that special issue. And I'm not going to let you write it down because you can just Google it or use it from the handout, one or the other. Too complicated. And this is a sign that has intrigued me a lot. So I was in New Zealand some years ago and going through this little town that was literally, if you blinked too much, you'd miss it type of town. And this is the town sign. Now you notice it's not one of these big, huge signs that you see driving into most of our cities, you know, on metal and all. This is something that is, you know, on a wooden sign. It did come from the ministry, New Zealand ministry, but this is a mission statement that family violence is not okay in Morrinsville. Wouldn't that be nice if, you know, coming into town here, you said family violence is not okay? And you don't have that sign. I don't have that sign either where I'm at. But it is my hope someday that we'll be as enlightened as New Zealand. And then we'll make these mission statements. And no hit zones is one of those. It's a mission statement. It's saying this is the kind of place that we want. If you're in a hospital, if you want to think of it that way, for hospitals, we don't need people hitting each other. We got people to take care of. You know, people need antibiotics, they need surgery, they need other things. We don't need hitting. That's not one of the things we need. And we want to teach a message, you know, about how to behave, you know, that's part of it as well. And there's a variety of different references that you'll get talking about some no hit zones and a variety of other things.